This is my first attempt at making some furniture, so I started off kind of simple, just a computer desk, but glued together a Birdseye maple. The pattern came out beautiful. I love the grain. Just to see how I made it, tools I used, everything. Just follow along in the video. There's descriptions of the tools down below. So you can see that. Kind of go along with what I think I did well, what problems I ran into for first time, and also if you're interested in more content like this, just hit the subscribe button and notifications. Here's the 3 pieces of Birdseye maple that I have. You can see some of the pattern here, a little bit of the Birdseye here, and just kind of 3D effect. It's beautiful wood. I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to lay it all out yet. But what I did was go through and mark, like this needs to be cut off a little bit here because I have in the end. And I'm trying to get about 6 feet. So I started off by face joining the pieces of maple because I just want to get it flat and get it square on the bottom, so I have at least a reference to start with. Now to speed up going through here, so I have a 12-inch planer, and I think this was like 10-inch pieces each or 10.5. So then got it through, and then I was just learning the joiner, so I actually trusted my track saw a little bit better here, and so I went to edge joint because I was having a little bit of trouble edge jointing, so I just want to get a square side after I got the one side flat. And I needed to plane the other side. Now that I had one side flat that I jointed, I ran it through, again, the planer underneath here just got parallel to that side. And then did it to all 3 boards and then just tested them out, kind of laying out, looking at how I wanted them to line up, kind of looking at the patterns, the way they lined up the best, and then just temporarily holding them here in the parallel clamps. And this is actually my first attempt with the planer. You can see how terrible it came out. I was sniping it everywhere, so I ended up having to sand all this down. But it didn't chip out the Birdseye figures, which was great. So it's my first look at them. And you can see kind of, it's hard to see with this, there's like a 3D effect with this wave. It's just, that's part of the Birdseye maple. That's not sniping. And then here's, again, you can kind of see that pattern. So I didn't do a really good job here on the edging, so I had to work on it a little bit. Again, this is my first attempt at a table, my first attempt at joining. But I just kind of worked through it and just kind of relied on, so I'm using the Domino here, and I'm using the index tab. So first I use that little edge, that little spring, and put it on, and I'll give you the right edge. And then that index tab has a little metal piece. I'm just kind of simulating it first because I was testing it out. And then you move it, you put the index tab in there, and then you joint, you put the Domino, the cutter into there, and then you put that index tab into the one you just cut, and then you slowly move down. And so I was continuing here, finding it as I was learning. So I was learning the jointer as well, the Domino here as well, for putting these tendons. So you see, I kind of put it in there, get it flush against the table, and then push it all the way down, and just work your way down. And you get near the edge, I had kind of adjusted a little bit. But here it is, where I did all sides, and then just kind of rough, see what it looked like with the tenons in there. These are the Domino loose tenons. And then I got all my clamps set up. One thing, also, I don't have a really big table. I just have that little MFT table, so I had to kind of glue together or hold together here. And then one thing I learned is you should get all your clamps, open them up. Make sure they're all the way open because I was struggling a little bit. And then the other thing I learned as I'm putting the glue in here is that putting the Domino tenons in there, they weren't too bad. A little bit pushing in, it wasn't too bad. But once you put glue in there, it is a whole different amount of pressure. So just pushing in, I didn't notice it, but you'll see I started having problems here, and I actually ended up having to drop the camera and just start working because the glue started setting up, because they're pushed in there and they're very tight. That's the characteristic of how they are, those Domino tenons. And they're so tight that trying to force the panels together with the glue, there's not a whole lot of place for it to go. So I actually made this, if you can see the glue dripping everywhere here, I'm making a bit of a mess. It's just my first time gluing up panels. I probably should have come up with something a little bit easier. And then I was trying to push them together here first, and they just weren't going. Again, the glue made it a whole different set. And I'm wearing not gluing clothes. I'm getting glue all over my clothes. So I start panicking here a little bit. Let me just grab this squeezy clamp, see if I can squeeze them together. That didn't seem to be working. And then so here was, I just kind of I bailed out of the camera, and I finally got it two pieces together. And the glue was setting up so quickly I didn't even get the third panel. But you see I got parallel clamps on the bottom, pipe clamps on the top, and then I have these panel clamps that I put on the top to try to keep it flat. So I left it overnight just to glue up, but again, I only had two pieces. But I went back and started scraping after they dried, scraping the glue off of here. So I figured it was dry enough. I'm going to take it apart and I'm going to try it again. But again, one of the lessons learned was to make sure you get all the thing all the way open. The clamp. So I'm going to try it again here, and this time using the parallel clamps, and they're forced to be able to push it together, because that's actually what I ended up doing that I didn't show on the other one. After I realized how much pressure it took to push them together with the glue in the tenons. So again, I kind of lay it down here and get a little bit better. Just kind of dry lay it up there and push it down. But again, one of the, I'm going to use the parallel clamps here to push them together. But one of the things, like I said, I learned is I had some of them that were already closed, and they can, have to undo it, slide it back, slide it in. But you see me a lot easier this time, just working up and down the parallel clamps and just squeezing them in. And there's one where I had to loosen it, push it back in. And this is kind of what it obviously looked like on the other one. Once I get the parallel clamps on top, just so you're not squeezing too much from one side and causing it to bow. And then I have those panel clamps or panels I put on the top. So this is the mess on the bottom where it dripped through, but just a lot of elbow grease, but it's not really that hard to get through. You can sand it off, but then it gets all in your sandpaper and it's a bit of a mess. So I start off with the Rotex sander here, just in the Rotex, which is their gear-driven mode, just because there's a lot to take off. A lot of glue, a lot of where the edges weren't exact. So I found that was the best way. So I ended up getting pretty good. You can't see, but it scratches it up a little bit, especially since I'm using 80 grit there. But I really wanted to start off, just get it down, and then I move over to the ETS, which is only a 3mm travel versus the Rotex, which I think is 6mm. And this is a true random orbit sander. So I actually went back with the 80 and just kind of flatten out any of those scratches, any of the edges. And then now I'm going to cut it to size now that I have it pretty close. So just using the T-square here it's bigger than 24 inches, so I had to go from both sides and kind of get a basic idea. And then use the track saw here just to get it square across there. So this is, I think I roughly cut it down just to get one side square, and then again measured it to the distance, and then cut it the other side. And so now I decided to go back would work my way up through the sanding. So I went from 120, I'm not going to show you because it's nothing more boring, 120, 180, and I'm using Rubio Monocoat, so you don't want to go down to like 220 or anything like that. And to give it the appearance that it's thicker, I cut these thin strips, so I didn't want it to be a 2-inch thick all the way across that I couldn't barely carry, so I was just kind of laying out some of these furring strips that I caught. And then I had to go through and sand each one of these just to make sure they were smooth. I'm not doing it as smooth as I am on the top. It's going to get coated or stained with the Rubio Monocoat, but it doesn't need to be as smooth at the top. And I actually wanted to hold the stain. I keep calling it a stain, but it's actually a dry wax. So I had one at the bottom here. Really never going to see it, but I was using the CA glue, which is kind of like super glue that's black. Just filling it in took me several tries, just because it would leak in and soak into some of the gaps. And then you use this activator spray, and it instantly makes it dry or cure. And then once it dried up, the activator, then I went back and sanded it flat here. So I have I said I've got all these pieces, and I make sure I numbered them, which you see later when I started mixing them up when I started sanding them. So I just cut the ends off just to get a kind of a square end just as I'm working with before I start. I'm actually going to bevel all 4 of the corners. So I'm just going to, like I said, squaring them off and then do the bevel, so I have a good way of measuring. So I have at least one square side. Like I said, those numbers really helped because I started losing track which side was up, which side was in the, which side. And here I actually made a mistake, but luckily I made it the wrong way. And I was able to recover. I just don't show it on here. So here's what it looks like. Just all 4 of them. Just kind of dry fitting to make sure what it looks like. I kind of moved them around, see which pattern of the wood that I liked the best. Just kind of making sure it lasted. And then here I'm doing dominoes, but these are much smaller ones. These are 5mm and a lot shorter. And so I'm just double checking, make sure when I go through it, it's not going to blow out the side. So I just make sure I know where I'm going to put it. So I'm going to line it up before I cut it, so that it can go out. And these I don't really need that much strength, but we're just using it a way to line up the miters. You can see it makes a nice square cut inside of there. So again, it's not adding a lot of strength, but I don't really need it because I'm actually going to screw these down. But what it does is, you'll see here, is it gives you a nice reference to square it up so you're not fighting. And here I'm using square clamps just to make sure they're square, because it holds them together, and just again dry fitting them. So now here, actually going to glue them up. So put it in, make sure it gets it into for the tenon joint, and then on the edge, and then here it's hard to tell, but I was gluing it up, or I put one in there, I got the other corner in, and then realized I had it upside down, and that I put the domino in the one that I was about to join it. So I had to go get pliers here. So this is all part of the learning process, but it really helped having, again, those numbers that I numbered each one of the pieces of wood, and then this was on the wrong side, so I had to go put this one over on this side. That one was meant to be on the other one, I think, because I had been sanding them. And some of them had fallen off. And then another one here, so I have to glue this one up again. So again, the glue started setting up a little bit because I was going back and forth, but it ended up not being too bad. But I wanted to make sure I get these corner clamps in there just so it stays square. They don't really pull together real well, but I was using that. And so I got all 4 in here, and then I pre-drilled the holes. I'd already pre-drilled them in the top of the wood, but I wanted to make sure that I screw it down so that once I had it dry, I could screw it down quickly. And then I needed to put so I ended up putting 2 support pieces. They doubled as support pieces. So there was a piece like I'm doing right here. This is the center piece. So I wanted a part in the center, and then there's 2 other ones. And the other ones that are off towards the end is where the leg sits. Like this is the leg. So right where my drill is the one I just put in. The leg sits here, and then I just wanted to pre-drill the holes in here, and then also pre-drill the hole into the top, so it goes through here and then it goes into the top. But I also wanted to make sure I put the screws in as well, and test them, make sure they're not going to blow through the top, and then pre-drill the screw into there, because it's actually very hard maple, and I broke my drill bit on one of them. I broke a bit trying to put some of those screws in, you see right there. So I wanted to make sure that I pre-drilled all the way down, and then pre-put the drill in there. And here's I'm countersinking. You can see it, the closer one that I already did, but this is what I had to do, which is I countersink the screws that went in there. And then I glued it down just for extra little bit of support, just to make sure it's not going to move. It's probably unnecessary with this many screws in there, but just wanted to make sure. So you can see I actually am going down, in and out with the screw, because it was needed a couple chances at it. So this is the screws that are going to hold the legs down, and so I'm using the impact driver, and it's hard to see again. I'm going down in a quarter inch or so, backing it out, going down in, going back and forth. And then I just wanted to make it nice instead of having a sharp corner, so I used a 1/8 inch round over, and then just round it over. This is I'm doing the bottom as well, just testing it out first. And then I use a soft pad on the ETS sander with I think it was 180 grit. But I really just use that soft pad so you can do the corners without flattening them out. Because you can press down and it doesn't force the sandpaper. I really didn't use it on the corners. I did them by hand just because I didn't want to do it too much. And you can see that as I ran the router over there, it gives you a little bit of shiny, kind of dulled the wood there. And so just want to make sure I sanded that in the corner and just got rid of all that and take it back to the nice. And one thing I didn't do perfectly was getting the wood together, just because jointing and planing it's not perfect. So I ended up using this wood putty and putting it in there. I found something that's pretty close. And then once it gets stained, it actually turns out much better. So that's me. That's on the edge where I've already sanded it. Here's the part where we're working it in. I think it took me 2 or 3 tries on some places where it's a little bit deeper. But you can see here, it's almost goes away, other than you can just see the wood between them. After done all the sanding, just blow it off, because I wanted to just make sure got it completely clean. And then I'm going to use some of the mineral spirits as well here. This is their Rubio's cleaner, but it's really just mineral spirits. One thing I liked is as I was cleaning here, I really got to see the grain just starting to pop out. So you can see those, it almost looks like defects in there, but it's really that 3D effect of the Birdseye maple. And so here it's cleaned up. You can see those edges pretty much go away here. So it really gave it a lot cleaner look. Some here I think I went back and finished a little bit better. And then one thing I wanted to do was it's a grain filler. So maple doesn't really need it because it's pretty hard, but I wanted to fill in some of those, the Birdseyes got ripped out by the planing process, and then there were some little dings and things like that, and I wanted to make sure it was just a glass smooth finish. So I use this, so you go across the grain with it, and then you go with the grain slowly like I'm doing to take off the excess, and then you let it dry. It only takes like 30-40 minutes, and then you sand it down with like 220. So I'm going to let it dry first, and then I'm going to work on my legs because they're raw steel and they had a little bit of rust on them. So I was using this PBW because I actually do beer making, and I know this is a good degreaser, and I want to make sure that I degrease or got rid of any of these industrials. But it didn't really do good on the rust, so I ended up with Barkeeper's Friend, which is acetic acid, and back with this 4-0 steel wool, and did a little bit better. So I was trying to reduce the number of chemicals I was using, but I ended up just having to. So this did a pretty good getting it off. You can see got it much clean and kind of scoured it down. But then I finally just gave up and went to the calcium or the CLR to get rid of it, the last bit of rust. And I've got gloves on now. But really, I just wanted to clean it up first with that PBW and then to get anything off, because I know I'm going to put a clear coat over top of it because I wanted that steel look. So this is the clear coat. So I was able to, this is the bottom that's actually touching, or sorry, yeah, that touches the ground, and then that's the bracket. So I did those two first, coated them, and then I actually flipped it around after it only takes like 5 or 10 minutes, and then I flipped it around and then just did everything else. And I think I ended up putting like 3 coats on it just to make sure I had a nice thick connection. And then here's, and now that after I went back, that first clear coat, or the grain filler was dried. So they want you to do 220. So it had a little bit of issue because Rubio doesn't want you to go over like 150. So I ended up doing 220 just to get it down smooth on this grain filler, and then actually back down to like 180 grit when I go back over the whole thing. And I think it took me like 3 or 4, and some parts took about 5 tries with this grain filler just because it was a deep kind of the Birdseye or some other issues. But it ended up making it perfectly smooth. And so I'm back on the soft just because I didn't want to go too much. And here's where I backed down to 180. Again, I didn't want to. I wanted to use a soft pad to make sure I didn't go down too far into any of the grooves, and just kind of like a nice soft touch. And I think I had it at like 1 or 2 on the variable speed just to make sure I didn't sand it down too much. And then another try just here, getting all the extra dust off with the compressed air. And then I use a tack cloth, which you've ever used. It's really nice. It's got like a waxy feel to it. It gets any last bit of sawdust off there. So you wanted to make sure it's completely clean before you go and try to finish. So you can actually see on my fingertips there where there's a little bit more sawdust that was actually to be able to pull off. So here's the Rubio Monocoat. It's 2 different pieces. So this, my hand is I'm using the Pure, which is just a linseed oil. It's got a little bit of a yellow. It's kind of a warming feel. And then what I'm putting in first is the accelerator. So you do 1 part accelerator, 3 part, whatever color or part you're putting in here. So I put that in first. If you don't put the accelerator, it takes like 20 days or something like that to fully cure. If you put the accelerator, it does it in like 5 days or so. And it can really be used in about 36, 48 hours. But you want to make sure you smooth it really well, or sorry, stir it up really well first. And I just want to try and show you how little you need, so that in the mixed, where you see in there, is what I use for the entire table. So you just put a little bit first, and then you use this like Bondo scraper, and you really just smooth it around. So what's nice is if just really get the first view of that warm kind of color pulling out the grain, and you get to see the bird's eye. So you can see you just kind of smooth it around here on the flat surfaces. This is a little hard on the bottom because I've got all these edges and things. So, but on the bigger surfaces, you can do most of it like that. So you start off with that, and then you get these the white Brillo. It's not the Brillo pad, but the white pads, and then you want to work it really into the grain. And then since I had to do the edges, I was using that as well to get up in the corners and around the edges as well, like I mentioned. So I'm doing everything I can all along the extra little pieces. And then what you want to do is you leave it for about 5 minutes, and then that's all it needs is to soak into the wood and molecularize. And then you want to get paper towels and just take off every little bit. You have to go over it many, many times, and you just keep doing it until your paper towel comes back clean. So like I said, it took quite a bit, especially in the corners. So now I'm doing the top where you can see I pour a lot more. It's gonna be it's a lot easier because I had just all flat surface. I still had to go around the edges. I left those just because they would be visible, and do it quickly here. But you can really see the pop coming out of the grain now, especially with that natural tone of the Rubio. And it's really starting to pull out the grain. Makes it has a little bit of warm color to it, a little bit yellow. So again, I'm just kind of spreading out as best I can. Then back to the white pad just to rub it in, get it really good into the grain, and then I use that to go around the corners. So all done. You already saw how it was already. You can see it's still a little bit wet, so I'm giving it to like 5 minutes just to soak in. But there's not much left over, and anything that doesn't get sucked into the grain or really is what you're wiping off. But you can see really starting to pop now. All the grain, those 3D effect kind of, and the bird's eye. And here it is wiping off, and you can see it looks like it's really shiny, but it's not really. It's just from the little bit of wet and just the way the glare is coming on. The Rubio comes in more of a matte, so this gives a better view of it. So this is the finished version here, and you can really see, like I said, that 3D effect on it. That's not any leftovers or anything. That's part of the grain. It has that view. And so I'm really just drying off the last little bits here. And then I left it for 2 days just to dry completely, and then I started putting the legs. Like I said, I had already pre-drilled. They were pre-screwed in, the screws, so they were threaded correctly, and it was easy just to get them down. I didn't want to torque them down too hard because I didn't want to crack any wood because it was so close, so I just finished it off by hand. And then it's sitting on a wood floor, so put some felt pads on both sides just so I can flip it over and not scratch the floor. And I'm finally happy. I can flip it over and take a look at the final product. Like I said, I'm really happy just for my first furniture, and definitely for a table here. You can see the front just looks like it's one thick piece just because I get the grain put together pretty decently. I like the legs, and you can see this nice matte finish on it. It's not too shiny, but you can still really see the grain just pop out. And here's just a view from the back. I kind of positioned it where I saw the grain was the best, but overall, really happy with it and glad I did it.